The altcoins are waking up and it's finally time. It's a bull market, and as promised, I'm going to discuss top 5 small altcoins that I'm watching to potentially add into my portfolio. And in this video, I'm going to explain why they are interesting and where I'm going to be buying them if I want to. So let's get started. Before we're continuing with this episode, I'd like to ask you for a small favor, which is to subscribe to our podcast channel, which is called New Era Finance. And we are making content bi-weekly to help you in your journey. Sometimes crypto might be very difficult, or you might not understand why a protocol is doing something or where we're going to be heading with the economy. That's why we created New Era Finance. And in order to make it bigger, or in order to get better guests, we need to have subscribers. And more than 90% of the people who watch aren't subscribed. So I'm just asking you for a small favor to go to the description beneath and to click on New Era Finance and subscribe there. So thank you very much. In this video, we're talking about altcoins. And this is a formal notice, which is that I'm not partnered with any of the protocols that we discuss. It's my personal opinion, and we are not being paid by any of them. If that is the case, then I'm of course sharing everything in terms of partnerships. And if you're looking at altcoins yourself, let me know in the comments beneath which altcoin I'm missing and which altcoin I should be looking at. I'm reading the comments and I'll be diving into those altcoins. Now, as we said, the markets are finally waking up. We see some hype and we have seen some new narratives starting to wake up. And that brings us into a question of, where are we in the market cycle? And I always bring on this cheat sheet, which is the phenomenal psychology of a market cycle. It basically says whether we are in euphoria or depression or anything in between. And you can basically put those onto the altcoin charts. You can do it on Bitcoin, and you can also do it on altcoins valued against Bitcoin. And then if we start to compare it to, for instance, ETH versus Bitcoin, then we can basically see that we are at the stage that we break out of the depression phase. And if we recall what the sentiment used to be in the previous period, then the fact that Ethereum was actually continuing to fall was a sign of weakness in the markets, and therefore it is not a euphoria stage. It is not the peak of the cycle. We are literally just breaking out of the depression phase. And if we start combining that with altcoins, for instance, then if we look at optimism versus USDT and we compare that to the stages of the market cycle, then we can also declare that this phase is basically called the depression phase. Or perhaps for some altcoins, we're getting into disbelief, because I know many Chainlink holders that all of a sudden start to become proud again to be a Marine because the price has been going up. So in that sense, we're still in that early stage. And when we are in that early stage, we can see that Bitcoin is moving first, then Ethereum is moving, and that's the moment where the large caps are starting to wake up. And after that, in the final stage, you will see smaller altcoins move upwards. And that is where the biggest return is possible, but also the largest risk is taken. And therefore, I've created a top 5 coins that I'm looking at or having in my altcoin portfolio, and they are in a completely random order. The first one that I wanted to bring up is something that's called Renzo. And Renzo has been a favorite of mine for a long time. And the reason for that is that it's combining a lot of things in the space. It's a combination between restaking, DeFi, and infrastructure, and it keeps on expanding and generating more TVL. And by the fact that it has more TVL, it's also generating more revenue. And recently we see stable coins and everything within DeFi quickly expanding, and that's why I believe that this one is also going to grow. Given the fact that the valuation of the asset is still massively low, I think that it provides a lot of upwards momentum, because the float has been negative, and it has also been listed in a period where we had the Binance listings that had the low float, high FTV case. And during that period, all those coins had negative statements and negative price action. And I believe that you shouldn't be blaming a founder for taking this strategy, because if a founder is pure technical and they know how to build a protocol and then they go onto Binance, for instance, I'm sure they will be advised by the exchange themselves to have the best case of a successful launch. So I think it's not a bad idea that a protocol like Renzo has taken this strategy and therefore has been getting into a situation where the coin has been sold off. And I think that by that case, we are actually having massive opportunities liquid in the market right now that any retail investor can actually benefit from. And on top of that, we are also seeing Binance season. BNB has been making a new all-time high. CZ has been launching a new DEX. So everything on Binance is actually waking up. So I think that that is an additional valuable argument to look at. And when we're looking at valuable arguments, we can also see that the chart has some very important technical information that we need to realize before we're diving into an asset. And the first thing is the big weekly bullish divergence that we can see. And given that it's on a weekly time frame, it takes a lot of time before it's going to happen. And once it starts to happen, it's usually a very big breakout upwards. And then secondly, it's about to break north of the 20-week MA, which is a technically crucial level to break through. And once that happens, we are eager for a bigger breakout upwards. And that's why I'm having it in my portfolio. And that's why I probably am going to keep it there as well. The second one is Giza. And Giza has a website, which is gizatech.xyz. It's another one comparable to Renzo, combining factors, but in this case, it's combining AI with DeFi and infrastructure. So it is basically a platform for AI agents that are looking to be building DeFi strategies or trading strategies. And it's also built on top of Base. And I think that the entire Base ecosystem is going to expand quickly in the coming period. So this is one for me that I find very interesting in terms of volatility, but I find it very interesting as well when we look at the valuation. It's still relatively low and there's still a lot of upside to come from, as it is still less than 200 million. And I think that the entire Base ecosystem is eager to grow, and therefore I think that there's still a lot of upside on this one. Plus, it's currently seeing a significant correction, which opens up the opportunity of getting into this one. And that might mean that if this is going to continue to correct or has a slight bounce upwards, that the valuation of the project is still a good one to look at. So those are the first two that I'm looking at. The next three are a little bit more difficult, and that's why we bring on the charts to explain where you should be interested and how you should be interested into those. We recently hosted our very first crypto masterclass with OKX, and it was a huge success. We had over 100 people joining us in Amsterdam for me to talk 1 hour about crypto and trading, an AMA, and we had drinks and a chat at the end of the night. We had people driving in from Germany and we had people flying in from the UK. And to be honest, this was something that I really wanted to do for years. And I think that we're going to be doing more of those events in the future. And if you want to be part of those events and want to know it the first, make sure to sign up through OKX in the link in the description beneath. And then you'll be the first to receive updates on all of the upcoming events. As I said, we just had 2 altcoins that we discussed, and there are 3 more that I find really interesting, and there are some new ones in there. Well, if you've been looking at my content for the past 5 years, then probably you're going to see one that has been on my content previously. But the first one I've discussed in a previous update where I said building a small altcoin portfolio, this one is definitely one to look at. And in that case, it's called Resolve, which is a very ambitious project that is trying to build an algorithmic stablecoin, which we've seen in 2022 and it didn't really succeed. But I think that we're getting into the stage that an algorithmic stablecoin might become big, and we see it with Athena as well. And that market is massive. And they basically have a system where if something goes wrong, they still have a liquidity pool to drag it back up. And I think that if it is going to work, it's going to be a massive multiplier. If it doesn't, of course, it's going to be a zero. But the market cap for Resolve is still relatively low compared to all the other stablecoin providers. And therefore, it creates a massive opportunity. And when we start looking at the prices of Resolve, then we can see that it's still in an accumulation period. And even if this one has been going up to 15 or 20 cents, it is still accumulating, because if you compare this valuation towards the bigger ones, then it's still very low. And even if this continues to fall, we can see that it's quite far away from the MA, but once it starts to build some more conviction in the chart that it's going to bottom out, it might mean that from that period the trend is going to switch, and then you have more arguments to be stepping into an asset like Resolve. So that is the third one. And the fourth one is one that I have been holding in the previous cycle, then sold it, and now it's back into my watch list, which is Skill Network. And Skill Network, if you recall, we've done an interview with the founder of Skill back in 2021 on this channel. And I think you could classify Skill as a potential layer 1 protocol. And the unique part of Skill is that they have such a big ecosystem of Web 2 projects that they are working with, or actually I should say companies, that the valuation is still very low and that the upside is still relatively big. The only concern is that it's super volatile. So be aware of that fact that once you start stepping into it, that it can go up 70% and just come back down again. And on top of that, I believe that the older coins aren't really dead. I think projects that have enough backing, that have a large enough treasury, can continue to build and continue to expand their ecosystem and then have a big revival. And this is kind of one of those, which is currently having a chart that has been getting into some slight bounces. Over the past few years, we've seen some slight runs. As you can see, we have had this big wick here, and it came back into a neutral phase that we're currently seeing that we are beneath the 20-week MA again. And that is where I start to show interest, because I believe that if the markets are going to rotate, this one is also going to bottom. And once it starts to crack that 20-week MA, that is going to be the big trigger to get into a position into Skill, because then we're going to be taking out all these highs here, which would then mean that we are going to get a big return. And the final one is a completely new one, which I've been discussing the deep in sector. I've been discussing peak. And I think that if you want to go even higher risk, smaller caps, then you should be looking at one that's being built on top of peak. And that is a project called Silencio. And they have just done a keynote some weeks ago on what they are building. And I think that the deep in vertical is something that you should be looking at and that should be into your watch list, because once it starts to hit, then I think that the upside is going to be really big on that vertical. And Silencio is basically share data to earn or something like it, where you can provide real noise data of where you are through your phone or through whatever device you have. And you get rewarded in Silencio tokens by doing that. And I think that this is going to be continuing to go bigger, because if I go to an hotel or if I go on holiday, I want to know the noise during the night when I sleep or during the morning. Or when I buy a property, I want to know the noise as well. So it's futuristic, but I think the combo between robotics and AI is going to be massive. The valuation is around 50 million. But the circulating supply makes it 9 million, which means that every time when there is some order coming in, it will have a big impact into the price floating around. And then when we look at the chart, we can see that we had an initial move upwards. So if this one is going to be getting a little bit more of a correction and goes back into the 25 to 35 million mark, I think it's going to be an interesting one to be added into the portfolio. That's why I keep having this on the watch list. And I think that if we look at other plays in the deep in vertical, for instance, Natix, that one quickly expanded as well with a little bit of hype. And I think that given that it's only 9 million, that any of these corrections in this area is going to provide a great opportunity to be buying it. But then again, if you're wrong, or if we are wrong, it could be 0 as well. So 5 altcoins, completely different verticals, and I think all of them are interesting, and that's why I've added them on the watch list. First of all, these are 5 altcoins that I'm watching on my watch list for my personal portfolio, which I think you would like to see yourself. So I think that these 5 might be interesting, but you need to be aware that these are all smaller caps. So the chances that they are all going to succeed is basically 0. Some of them will, some of them won't. So if you want to have a big return, you need to be looking at these altcoins. But then the downside is that you can go to 0 because the volatility is super high. So do what you want with this data. Do what you want with these 5. I hope you have been enjoying the update, and I'll see you again on the next one. And make sure to subscribe. I'll see you again. Ciao.